Okay, our recording is on and we're beginning. Good morning. I'm Jamie Spagnardi and I come to you from GREC. As you can see, I'm not at GREC physically, but I'm at GREC in my heart. And so we are so delighted to join together with the Center for Gifted Studies and collaboratively bring this network to you.
Can you hear that okay?
You've been meeting and I have not been at your meeting, so I'm new to this group. And I appreciate that I have the opportunity to help co-facilitate the group. So we're going to go ahead and get started. We're going to have opportunities today, let me just say that, for you to talk. And you always can look at your, put things in the chat box. Tracy Inman has graciously volunteered to watch that chat box for us and make things happen there. So I'm going to share the screen. Okay. So here we are today. We're November the 5th. And just for fun, let's take a look at these pups. And on a scale of dog, how are you feeling today? So open up the chat box and tell us 1 through 6 how you're feeling today.
Jamie, do we tell that by the expression on the dog's face?
Absolutely. Oh, seeing a lot of different numbers come up. I must tell you that number 4, those of you that know Allison know that she is my daughter. We sometimes tell that, sometimes that she tries to keep that a secret, I think. But she had a dog when she was growing up, and it looked exactly like dog number 4. And so that's why I had to choose this slide when we were doing this for fun. We know that some days we might feel like dog 5, but today, I have to say, when I look at number 4, I want to have a day like Spotty. Spotty always had good days. Well, thank you for doing that. Gets us started. Tracy is placing a sign-in link in the chat box. And what's magic about the sign-in link is that we capture who you are and where you're from. It helps us be sure we have all your addresses correct and everything. And I do apologize, a couple of you, I had the wrong folks in. I think we remedied that. But so we will also, it will automatically send you a certificate for today too, to show that you were involved in the network meeting. So we want to do that. The reason we have Piglet and Pooh on here is just to remind you that, just as Julia said earlier, we wish we could all be together. We just wish we could give everyone a big hug. I have to say, I don't know that we'll all be hugging like we want to hug for a while, but we certainly want to be where we can all be together in a room at some point soon. So you know that if we could, we'd be together and we'd have some nice soft drinks and coffee and water and maybe a nice yogurt and some granola, and we would all be having the kind of community feeling that we love to have with our networks. But at least we can all see each other, and we're thankful for the technology, and we're so happy about it. Today, you're in for quite a treat, and I think Julia's going to take some time now and introduce Dr. Adams for you.
I am delighted to introduce Toddy, and I'm sure she is well known to many of you. And she is Dr. Adams, kind of a recent doctorate. She completed her doctoral degree last spring at Southern Illinois University, and I had the honor of being one of the members of her doctoral committee. So I can kind of trace that. And in her academic work, she focused on RTI for gifted students, as that was something that she had been implementing in Marshall County, where she is the gifted coordinator. And I want to add that Tottie's the recent president of the Kentucky Association for Gifted Education. She's been very active in gifted ed for quite a while. And it is my pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Tottie Adams.
Well, thank you so much for that. And I am just very, very proud to be here and to share any information I have with all of you, because we are working together to meet the needs of gifted kids and to further gifted education along. So anything that I can do to help, I'm happy to do that. As I am going through this presentation, what I ask is if you have questions during the presentation, please go ahead and put it on the chat. And Tracy, you'll communicate that, is that correct? Okay, because I do much better with interaction than I do just rambling on and on. So I just want you all to know that. So let me share my screen. And you all, I'm assuming you all can see this okay. Mm-hmm. So again, thank you for letting me be here. And it is not going to the next one. Give me just a second. Okay. So for today, I'm not going to focus on the research of my dissertation. I am going to mention it, but I really want this to be more practical so that you all can see that implementing GTRTI, Gifted and Talented Response to Intervention, is something that can be done in the districts. So before we look at the implementation of GTRTI, we need to just quickly go through the structure and some of the processes of GTRTI. Now, my research questions when I was doing my dissertation, I've got them up here, and what I found was that implementing GTRTI did effectively help in identifying gifted learners in ELA and in mathematics. So the reason I concentrated on those two areas was because that's what part of RTI, that's what RTI does. So it was very easy to take what was going on in Marshall County with RTI and then put the GT twist to it. And then I looked at how does GTRTI aid in increasing percentages of elementary gifted learners in the federally required student groups. Now, what I found with that is we are not a very diverse district. So even though, you know, it did help with identifying some disadvantaged children, I feel that this has great potential in increasing percentages from the federally required student groups, but it was very hard to have those implications here in Marshall County. And the last thing that I looked at was, does this help ensure the utilization of research-based gifted service options? And I found that it did. So the only thing that I wish could have been a little bit different was increasing those percentages of gifted learners in federally required student groups. But like I said, we're not a very diverse district. So now very quickly, I'd like to go through the structure and processes of GTRTI. And in order to do that, we just have to look at basic response to intervention. Now, as I go through these bullet points, what I ask you to do is look at this through a gifted lens. So we're going to just sort of look at the parallel of this. So RTI is rooted in special education. And the reason RTI was developed is because there were discrepancies regarding IQ and achievement of kids who were being identified for special education. So when they started really investigating this of kids who were identified as special ed, and maybe they were really not special education students. They found that there might be some confounding of variables, which means maybe the reason the child wasn't achieving was because they had a weak teacher one year, or there was weak curriculum. Maybe the child just, something between the IQ score and the achievement that was happening in the classroom, it just wasn't making a lot of sense. If you look at this through a GT lens, are there confounding of variables when you're trying to identify gifted students? Are they in a classroom where maybe differentiation is not occurring? Do they have a weak teacher who does not understand characteristics of giftedness? Are they not really trying on their tests, whether it be MAP or STAR or iReady or whatever is used for progress monitoring? Are we really getting the data that we need to effectively identify kids? So you can see that RTI and GTRTI, we have some of the same problems, and they go hand in hand. Well, this evolved into an approach to identify and service students with reading disabilities, and this has evolved to help identify gifted students. It's currently implemented to include identification of low achieving students, but this can be tweaked to identify our language arts and our math students, in fact, students in all of the gifted areas. And that's what I'm going to be showing you today. So here we have our pyramid that I think everybody is familiar with. This is all about identifying and servicing students. Of course, tier 1 is the general population. Tier 2 are kids who might be potentially gifted education or special education. And then tier 3 are kids who really need intense interventions, whether they are special ed students or they are gifted students. So what we do with GTRTI is we follow the basic RTI principles. We want our tiered instruction. Everything should be evidence-based. Students should be progress monitored, and any decision that is made for our gifted student or our special needs student must be informed. So this is how GT, RTI, and RTI go together. Now, both RTI and GTRTI are based on the Kentucky System of Interventions. If you want to go there, you just go to the KDE website, you put in KSI, and the very first one that pops up, that gives you the guide to RTI and GTRTI. So because I implemented GTRTI within gifted programming, I wanted to make sure that I was doing everything according to regulations. I wanted to stay in compliance. So I used KSI as a guide for everything that I did. Now, just remember that when you are working within GTRTI, it is a system of tiered interventions with tier 1 as the general education classroom, where differentiated core instruction is occurring. And I cannot say this enough. If a teacher does not have strong core instruction in that very basic first step, it's going to be very difficult to implement interventions. You have to have differentiated core instruction so that students have opportunities to shine, so that you know which students are going to move up through the tiers. Tier 2 is going to be those small group interventions. And as you read this, I know with Corona that this is not happening within the schools. So let's just take COVID-19 out of the picture right now and prepare for the future, when we can go back to small groups that can get together for a certain length of time, because I know that is not happening in the schools, and I just have to say that. Tier 3 would be individualized instruction in addition to Tier 1 and Tier 2 instruction, just like RTI. So this is our system of tiered interventions. Very, very important, you have to do this with fidelity. So when you are looking at a gifted child's interests, strengths, and needs, that has got to be considered before you implement any interventions. And the interventions just go hand in hand with the gifted service options. So we are looking at, whatever is on Infinite Campus that you are clicking, saying that your district is implementing for service options, those are the interventions, or can be. So for example, if you have differentiation happening in core instruction, that's what you click on Infinite Campus. Enrichment, acceleration, there might be independent research. And of course, we know that acceleration has got a multitude of options that are research-based. I do want to say, I put the word effective in front of differentiation of core instruction. I put it there very purposefully because I know that teachers, for example, may say, well, I'm differentiating. I have a choice board and I allow student choice, and in this choice board, they're able to, pick whatever. But if it's not challenging, if it's not thought-provoking, if it's not the higher levels of Bloom's, it may not be effective. Well, this is where GTRTI and the meetings come in, that this can be monitored and we can make sure that effective differentiation is occurring, whether it's in the general education classroom of Tier 1 or Tier 2 or Tier 3. GTRTI really helps monitor what's happening with our gifted kids and our potentially gifted kids. Progress monitoring can happen in a variety of ways. I receive most of my data from anecdotal records from our GTRTI meetings. I also, besides speaking to teachers and them supplying the information of what's happening with their students, I also talk to students. So for example, if I have a teacher who is describing a high-level reading group that is reading a book a couple of grade levels above, with thought-provoking questions that are very in-depth and enriching, when I talk to students later on, and I might ask them, so tell me about the reading group that you're in. And I've got to tell you, 99% of the time, the students are confirming exactly what the teachers have told me. And then I get the child's point of view. I may have children who say, it's just really hard and we really have to think and work as a group and we try to come up with the best answer. And I might still have students who say, well, I know it's supposed to be harder, but it's still pretty easy. And then when I talk to teachers, I can relay that information back. So this is looking at differentiation from several points of view. I have to say that the most important part of this and collecting that data is that administrators are present in all of the GTRTI meetings. And when I work with teachers, I am not going into these meetings as any type of supervisor. I am going in there as their colleague who is concerned about the children in their classroom. It's the administrator in the meeting that they are accountable to, not me. So where I come in with the suggestions and we make a plan for the student, meaning the GSSP, it is the administrator who, if things are not going right, it's the administrator who is going to speak up and support me and what is best for that child. Now, this really cannot be done unless you educate the educators. And this is another part of the beauty of GTRTI. I meet with the teachers, the administrators, and the guidance counselors once a month. So we do not have to have formal PDs that are written into the CSIP or whatever and try to fit gifted education into some type of formal professional development plan, even though that is absolutely an option. We're talking gifted education all the time. Every month that we meet for GTRTI, or if I'm invited to a PLC meeting, or if I'm invited to a faculty meeting, gifted education is constantly talked about with the teachers, with the principals, with the guidance counselors. So this keeps it in the forefront. Just know that you have got many options. And if you do implement GTRTI, that is an opportunity to speak about gifted education once a month, if not more. Because there's a lot of emails that go back and forth as well as we're discussing the needs of children. And I can put in those emails, usually it's a group email with a grade level, I can mention best practices, I can mention resources. So it's actually more than once a month. But our educators have to know about the nature and needs of gifted students and best practices when it comes to curriculum and instruction. And that's where we come in, because we are the experts in our field. The collaborative structure of GTRTI is absolutely beautiful. And the reason that I bolded plans are made according to student needs and monitored, I did that because of a lot of conversations I've been having with Region 1 GT coordinators since COVID hit. When they talk about talking to the teachers, they'll say, I suggested that they try this with their students when they're on Google Classroom. I suggested this enrichment. And that's what has to be done right now. Right now, we're just in crazy times. And if there are suggestions, that is fine. But when we're done with this, and when I implement GTRTI, it is not a suggestion. It is an actual plan that the teacher is going to follow in the classroom. It's an actual plan that's going to happen with interventions that are research-based and that are implemented with fidelity, and it's on the Gifted Student Service Plan. So it's different to make a suggestion than it is to make a plan. The plan has to be followed. A suggestion does not have to be followed. So I just really wanted to make that clear, because things are strange right now, and I'm hoping that when we get back to some type of normalcy, that our GT coordinators go past making suggestions and they go back to making plans. So that collaborative structure, it makes for a lot of good conversation. It's where I get all of my anecdotal information. Kids that are working above grade level, they're at grade level. I copy and paste what is said to my GSSP progress reports. I have it in the teacher's words. I don't know if you all have your teachers fill out the progress reports or if you fill out the progress reports, but either way, this provides a lot of great information besides just looking at grades or continuous progress. So now that's the background of it. That's the structure. Now I just want to touch a little bit on implementing, how GTRTI is implemented. So the way I've done it here in Marshall County, and believe me, when I was doing my dissertation and I was learning from my mistakes, what I could handle here in the district, I've got to say the whole reason I went this route is because I became the only gifted coordinator. We've had two for years and years and years. We have 6 elementary schools, 2 middle schools, and a high school. We've always had one GT coordinator who does elementary. The other GT coordinator does middle and high. And when our middle and high person left, they did not hire another person because of funding. So now I have 441 students and it's just me. I had to find a way to stay in compliance with KDE, but try to do the best thing for kids. And believe me, I've never been quiet that we need another GT coordinator to be hired. So I turned to GTRTI, which was a big blessing in disguise because it's what I ended up doing all of my research on. And this is how I figured out how to do it. All of the tier 3 kids are the primary talent pool and gifted students who need the intense interventions, which are the gifted service options. Now, as I say that primary talent pool and gifted students are tier 3, just remember that the tiers are flexible. So depending on the lesson of the week or the unit that is being taught in the classroom, we might have gifted students that move to tier 2, or we might have potential students that move up to tier 3 because they've been pre-assessed and they're able to do the work. So just remember that as I go through this, these are flexible tiers. Our tier 2 students are all of the potential primary talent pool and gifted students, and they are being given opportunities through differentiation for us to see if they have those strengths. And then the tier 1 students are all of the students who are receiving the differentiated core instruction in the general education classroom. This is our GT RTI tier guidelines. It may be a little bit hard to see. I actually have this, it's a handout that I can easily put a link later on, but I couldn't do the presentation without referring to our guidelines. So if you look at tier 3 identification, it's the middle column up at the very top. What Marshall County really focuses on is if behaviors indicative of giftedness are present. Those behaviors trump any test scores. Those behaviors that are listed on the teacher recommendations or that you can find in any textbook, behaviors of intellectually gifted students, creative students, we first and foremost look for those behaviors. We also look to see if students are exhibiting mastery or if they are exceeding mastery of the standards. We look at their classroom performance. We look to see if they are successful with adaptive curriculum. And in the days of COVID, when we have so many kids that are using computer programs, that has actually become easier to see if that adaptive curriculum that they're doing either at home or in the classroom, if they are moving on through the standards. We look to see if they're successful with interventions of enrichment and acceleration. And last of all, we look for those scores to see if they're in the 9th stay 9, or if they have special considerations that are inhibiting them from making a score in the 9th stay 9. So those test scores support everything that we've already seen, or they don't support it because there's special circumstances. So I'm not going to go through this whole document, but this is where GTRTI really, really helps with identification, because we're talking about those behaviors. The educators are aware of the behaviors because they are always part of a conversation. And then everything else starts supporting what they see. And because they are tiered, the kids have opportunities. It always goes back to that word, opportunity. Now, I keep everything on my Google Drive so that I can access it no matter what school I'm in. And if you look at my folders here, you can see all the different schools: Benton Elementary School, Calvert City Elementary School, Central Elementary School, GTRTI. I keep a 1 in front of it, so it's right there at the top, and I can access it no matter where I am. When I click on that folder, I have all of my spreadsheets for all of the different schools. And this is how I keep my data. It's how I can refer to it no matter where I am. And what I did is I just took, this is Benton Elementary School, and I just took out the students' names so that you all can see some of the data that I collect. The very top one, those are kindergarten students at Benton Elementary. They don't have 3 pieces of evidence at this time. We know that they don't need formal testing to be in the primary talent pool, but you can see that Misty started talking about a student, and basically all she said is, from what I can tell so far, this child is very high in reading. And then she said, and I have another child who's really high in math. And because it's this time of the school year, they didn't have a lot to give me, but they gave me a little bit, and that's all I was looking for. If you look down at the second spreadsheet, these are first graders. And I now have students who have 3 pieces of evidence. And because of NTI in the spring, we didn't get to do our identification meetings, our committee meetings. So I did a very informal committee meeting, and you can see we now have children that are qualifying for the primary talent pool. If you look down at Alicia Brophy, there's a child who's a full grade level ahead, and she wants that child in the primary talent pool, and I need to go back and look at some evidence on that child to see if they're going to qualify. If they have high vocabulary, whatever teachers tell me, that's the anecdotal information I put down on my spreadsheets. This is second grade. Now I have tier 3 primary talent pool students, and you can see I have all of these tier 2 students who may just have a test score. For example, the third student down under tier 2, it says MA for math. That child had a first grade star score of, I think it was at the 92nd percentile. But the teacher's telling me this is just an average student. So I have got at least 1 piece of evidence on these tier 2 students. And I have teachers tell me, okay, they've got potential for being in the primary talent pool, or no, this is just an average student. And I'm just sort of keeping track of what is going on with these children. For third grade, you can see my list is getting longer and longer. I have my primary talent pool students at the top. I have all of the tier 2 students. Every one of these, every child was discussed at our last meeting on the 28th. You can see it's a big caseload, but the kids deserve to be discussed and to have opportunities to shine. Students, if they make it or not, see if they're capable. And then we have our tier 3 students who also get those, get even more opportunities. Here's my fourth grade tier 3 and tier 2 students. The top ones are gifted and talented students. Now you can tell that I'm asking specifically about differentiation, if they're being enriched and how they're being enriched, how they're accelerated. And then the tier 2 students, I have teachers who say, it's a hard worker, that child's a hard worker, but I'm not seeing signs of giftedness. And they can say that because interventions are in place to allow the child opportunity, and either they're coming through or not just one time, but consistently. Yes.
I have a question. How long does that meeting typically take when you meet individually?
It takes just about 50 minutes or so. Kindergarten is a shorter meeting because of the amount of kids, but the 3rd and 4th and 5th grades take almost the full hour.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And it can be 45 minutes to an hour. It really depends on how chatty the teachers are. Okay. And so here's the 5th grade with the tier 3 gifted students. We don't have this many gifted students in the 5th grade. For example, the virtual student, if you go down, it says GI, ELA, and MA. That's one student who's identified in 3 different areas. So I always put my students on here, but I keep them separate so the teacher can talk about that area of giftedness. So I just want to make that clear. And then the tier 2 students at the bottom, those are all of our tier 2 students. The reason I wanted to screenshot the spreadsheets is just so you have an idea of how tier 3 and tier 2 are organized, and then how I keep the anecdotal records. So again, that's how I keep anecdotal records, but I also wanted to show the identification spreadsheets that I use. And again, they're on my Google Drive, so I can access them anywhere. If I go to my identification spreadsheets, I made a sample of Benton Elementary without student names, just so I could show you. And this is how I keep all of the data for continuous progress and for test scores. This is where the tier 3 and tier 2 students come from. Now, I need to make it very clear that between the yellow English language arts and the purple math, there are hidden columns, because these are 5th graders. And when I did this screenshot, I was looking at test scores up to 5th grade, so I keep 6th, 7th, and 8th hidden. But what is also hidden is continuous progress. And there'll be just a little CP for continuous progress. Any student that has white along those rows, they've been identified in those areas. So you can see, for example, tier 3 GT student number 1, if you go to the purple, that committee meeting gave a yes in 2020. The teacher recommendation came from 4th grade, and you can see when they got the test score.
Toddy, I'm
yeah.
sorry. How
Go
many
ahead.
students do you guys have in K-5 in your district? People are just trying to get an idea of time.
You're trying to get an idea of time?
Well, one question was, how many students do you have in your district who are kindergartners through 5th graders?
I have those numbers at the end when it comes to who I'm documenting for, but I don't have the entire, I don't know that number off the top of my head for the entire district.
Do you have an idea of how many are identified as gifted?
I have that at the end of the presentation.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. So the spreadsheets, if a teacher says, I don't understand why that child is tier 2 in language arts, that's when I pull up this spreadsheet and I can tell them exactly what scores the child has, what continuous progress the child has, what teacher recommendations the child has. I have all of this at my fingertips no matter what school I'm in. If you look under general intellect for COGAT scores, you can see that GT student number 3 had special considerations. And then we have the COGAT scores on there. I'll get teachers say, I don't understand why this student is identified in general intellect. And I can say they're showing an IQ of 134. And I always have my information right then and right there at my fingertips. If I'm going to ask the teachers to talk to me about students, then I have to be able to talk to the teachers about the students as well. And I need to have my data organized and handy. So this is just an example of how I keep track of all of the kids and where the tier 3 and tier 2 students come from. Here are the pros of GTRTI. Those constant conversations. Gifted education is talked about constantly. It's all about organizing the data so that it's in a usable form. All of that data is analyzed. When we start talking about tier 2 students, we're analyzing their abilities, whether it's from online programs, classroom performance, social emotional issues, anything that might inhibit learning. It's always being talked about. We talk about the potentially gifted learners and their abilities. We talk about their characteristics. I can monitor differentiation of core instruction because it's constantly asking the teachers, so what's going on in the classroom? Adaptive programs in this day of virtual learning are a godsend. And then I can monitor continuous progress by talking to teachers and talking to students. What I didn't expect from all of this is that I have information that I can copy and paste straight onto the progress reports. If I have a parent who wants to go through grievance procedures, I have all of the information at my fingertips of what teachers have said. If they want services changed, I can tell them exactly what's going on with their child. Sometimes they just don't realize all of the differentiation that is occurring. And I can always answer parent, teacher, administrator questions because of all of the conversations that happen. And I have to tell you, these are really wonderful conversations of give and take. The first thing I did, and it took me years, was build relationships with my colleagues. This could not happen if there were not relationships of trust and understanding and caring for our students. And because there's that mutual respect and mutual trust, that's why all of this can occur. It would not happen without that. Here are the cons of GTRTI. This is my caseload. You can see I have 441 gifted students or primary talent pool. The tier 2 students almost doubles it. And then you can see my caseload is 867 kids. Now, I will say, I took these numbers to my superintendent last week and I said, you cannot tell me that that's not a ridiculous number. You really need to hire somebody else to help me, because where my downfall with GTRTI that correlates with this number is I should have a GT coordinator, or it should be me, who is helping with interventions with the kids. We should have someone who is actually implementing the interventions and helping the teachers. And that's where Marshall County is absolutely failing with GTRTI, because we don't have the manpower. But I'm in compliance and I'm doing my best, but I'm not doing what's best for kids, because we do need another person. Did that answer the question okay then, Tracy, about the numbers?
I think it did. Thank you. It's that's an exciting number when I think of how many kids are going to get services, but it's also impossible, Toddy, with one person. It's impossible.
It is. GTRTI makes it doable, but we still have holes in the program. I need someone at the middle school and the elementary level who understands differentiation and can help with those interventions. So I'd like to say that we are on the right track with GTRTI, but we are definitely not there yet. And I think that's the end of it. Does anybody have any questions? I'll start sharing my screen so that if anybody has any questions, if I need to clarify anything.
Well, I'll start with my own question. How many GT endorsed teachers do you have in your district?
One.
Am I looking at her? Okay.
So when I went to the superintendent, when I went to Mr. Lovett, and you know, I've never gone to my board office with a complaint or a problem. I've always gone there with a solution. So my complaints and problems are masked with, this is what's going on and this is how to solve it. So when I went to him with these ridiculous numbers, my solution is, I'm coming to you now because I know you're going to do the budget in the spring and we need another gifted person. The first thing he did was go to EPSB to look at gifted endorsements, and he said, I don't have anybody else in the district that has their gifted endorsement. So the two people that I thought had their gifted endorsements, I think they're missing their praxis.
That's doable for the spring.
Which is absolutely doable, because I know that they've had the classes in the past. I know they have. So that's my theory, but I'm not going to go to them and ask because they may not do the budget, and I'm not going to get anybody's hopes up. So I'm taking it one little step at a time.
Lottie, I have a question. How did you build the relationship with your administrators so that they would support you and be present at those meetings?
Absolutely, Mary. You know, I got hired in this position in 2006. And for 2 years, I did it exactly the way the GT coordinator before me did it, which was completely wrong. Identification was wrong. We had teachers' kids in the program over truly identified kids. And I just kept my mouth shut and I did what the principals told me to do. And they wanted these kids enriched so they would do better on the test. And I zipped it up and I worked with kids. And as I started building relationships with principals and with the board office, I started bringing in best practices in gifted education and what a gifted child really is. And I took these little bitty baby steps, and we started getting away from teaching to the test and having our gifted kids do well in testing to what truly are their needs. What are their social emotional needs? What are their intellectual and creative needs? What are their academic needs? But it just took time. About 5 years ago, our last big class of overpopulated gifted kids graduated from the high school. The worst thing for a gifted program is to identify kids at the elementary level and the middle school teachers are going, they're gifted? What? And then the kids get to high school and they can't do dual credit, they can't do AP classes, they can't do honors classes because they don't have the capabilities, yet they're identified as gifted in that area. So this really is about truly identifying gifted students and looking at kids with potential, not just for the best of the kids, but for the integrity of the program. If your program doesn't have integrity, then where's the trust? So it took me a long time. By nature, I'm a very patient person. I don't hurry for anything. So to get in this position and take my little baby steps and build trust with my board office, with the administrators in the schools, there was this beautiful trickle-down effect. And then working with teachers who I consider my colleagues and my friends, it just worked out. Then to implement GTRTI, the timing was incredible. There was a lot that went into this for years and years and years.
Toddy, Hannah has a question. She wants to know, are identified GT students represented in all 3 tiers or just in tier 3?
They're in all 3 tiers.
All 3 tiers. Okay.
Now, not when it comes to the numbers at the end. Mm-hmm. The 441 was GT, and the 426 or whatever next to it, that was not GT. That was tier 2 potential kids. But when it comes to getting service, they get service through all 3 tiers.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Now, I will say this. I think it was last year, maybe, I did a PD with Encage. And I made, on my Google Drive, I made a share folder with all of my identification spreadsheets, all of the teacher recommendations, anything I have that's digital on our GT website, I shared those Google Docs with Encage. So that folder is open to the public. And what I can do is send that link to Greg. And if anybody would like to utilize any of those spreadsheets, the only thing I ask is that you make a copy and save it before you start tweaking it to use it in your district. For example, you may not use STAR. I think I still have K-Prep on there for social studies and science, and we no longer use K-Prep. So that the forms are a little bit old. You know, we use COGAT, you might use WISC. So if anybody would like to use any of this documentation, I will make it available to them, but don't change it on, you know what I mean? Just make a copy of the form first. Anything that I have, I am just proud to share with anybody. And what I always ask is, if you find a way to expedite any of this information, share it back so that I can revise and hone and make things better in my district as well. I'm always open to suggestions.
We're all in this together, definitely.
Absolutely.
Allison wants to know if you work directly with students or is your work mainly with the classroom teachers?
I meet with the teachers monthly, and I meet with students monthly as well, if possible. There are some times that instead of meeting with teachers, I meet with students. There are some schools that I meet with teachers one month, students the next, because not a lot changes month to month. I do meet with students. What I'll do at the middle school, this is pre-COVID, okay, I've got to put that in there. All the 6th grade students would come into the library, for example. We might do a brain activity. I might give them some information on things that are coming up. And then I would say, if anybody needs to talk to me one-on-one, I'm here. The rest of you can go back to your class. If you have a concern, if you have a need or something good to tell me, stay. And I always have a handful of students stay. And they might say something from, I'm bored in my math class and I know I'm gifted in math and I don't know why the teacher won't, whatever, to tell me how hard or how difficult something is. So I still get the one-on-one with students, and then at high school it's by appointment. They just, if they want to talk to me, they email me, and I find time to go to the high school. But you know, the high school has, Marshall County High School has all the areas of giftedness covered very, very well. But the principal will email me if we have gifted students who are getting D's or failing, and I counsel with them. So I have a big caseload of documentation, but I don't talk to every high school student. There's over 200 gifted students at the high school.
Are there other questions for Toddy? Comments, responses? How are the gifted students served the rest of the month?
That's through differentiation in the gifted service options. So you have to remember, I'm not servicing them once a month. That's not what I'm doing. I'm not doing pull-out. I'm not servicing them. They're serviced every day through differentiation. They're serviced every day, or so many minutes per week of intervention time. So me pulling them out is not servicing them once a month. I'm checking up on them. Their services are being monitored by me talking to them and talking to their teachers. So I'm not the one who's actually servicing them. And I know you all know this. I know that we say this like a broken record, but the children are not gifted when they meet with the gifted coordinator. They're gifted 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and they deserve to be serviced for more amount of time than just meeting with a gifted teacher. So yeah, they're being serviced a lot, hopefully, because I've got to tell you all, this is again the beauty of GTRTI. When I meet with a teacher, let's say a 5th grade or a 6th grade teacher, and they're teaching math, and they keep saying over and over again, oh, that child, they're on grade level. Oh, that gifted child in math, they're on grade level. And that gifted child, yeah, they're on grade level. Now the principal is sitting right there in the meeting, and the principal is going to say, why are they on grade level if they're gifted? What are you doing or not doing? And that's not my job. My job is to bring in the resources and make the plan, but if the teachers don't implement the plan, they're answerable to their administrator. That's why it's a big group effort. It's a big team effort.
Well, I'm thrilled to know that administrators ask, why are they just on grade level? Why are they not beyond? Because I think that might not be the case everywhere.
And that's because they've been educated. There's been a lot of talk about best practices. You know, we're in like our 3rd year of GTRTI. So this may not happen in a school district immediately. This is about building blocks. So yeah, we've come a long way.
Are there any other questions for Toddy? How do you service students in the arts areas?
In middle school, we have our art teachers. So I don't really want there to be confusion. I'm going to backtrack just a little bit, and I'm going to talk about the high school. Then I'll talk about middle and elementary. Marshall County High School used to be on an AB schedule. So they would have their 4 classes on Monday, their next 4 classes on Tuesday, then go back to the Wednesday. You know what I mean? AB, 4 classes every A day and every B day. After our school shooting, they decided not to do that because the kids carried around these huge book bags full of books, and they wouldn't use their lockers, and they were constantly carrying around all of these books. And Marshall County High School wanted to cut back on all the stuff that the kids were bringing into the school just for the safety issues. And they really wanted to encourage the kids to use their lockers. So we went to, instead of an AB schedule, we went to an A semester and a B semester. So let's say you have a child who's identified in art, and where they were getting art all school year long with an AB schedule, now they're only getting it 1 semester. But it's the same amount of minutes, the same amount of hours. So on their GSSP, there's a statement under the comments that the child may not be getting art the entire semester, but they are being serviced in art. You all understand. So the middle schools are the same way. They have art teachers, but they may only have art for 6 weeks. So if they have art for 6 weeks or 9 weeks or however the schedule is like, we want the kids hopefully to get some art in general education classes, but if they don't, they had their art class. And then at the elementary level, all of our art teachers are are classified teachers, but we have 1 certified art teacher who oversees the classified art teachers. So anytime we have a child who's in tier 2 for art or tier 3 primary talent pool or gifted, I don't just talk with the art teacher, I talk with the district art teacher as well at the elementary level. That was a long answer for an easy question. I'm sorry about that.
Well, no, I mean, that's the details, the important part if folks are going to try to replicate anything. So that was the way for art. Is it the same for drama, dance, those kinds of the other visual?
For dance, we're very fortunate that Marshall County High School has a dance team. And any of our elementary and middle school students who are identified in dance get invited to work with the high school dance team. Now, they may not be able to perform, but they definitely they're invited to all of the practices, and they do all of that. And when we identify a child in dance, it's the dance team coaches that are part of the committee to help identify them. So they already know the potential before the children get invited. We don't have dance at the elementary level. I think one of our middle schools has a dance team, so everything gets deferred to the high school. Yeah.
Any other questions? Well, if you happen to, I was going to say on your drive home, but that doesn't happen anymore. If you think of other questions, I am sure Toddy would be delighted to answer anything just about at any time. I've always found you to be so accessible and just insightful with your answers. So thank you so much, Toddy.
I appreciate that. And we're just all working for the good of these kids, and anything I can do to help, I just hope somebody lets me know.
Thank you so much. And I think we'd be remiss as Tottie's connection with CAGE to not encourage every person on this call to be a member of CAGE. It's so critically important that you are part of the advocacy organization. And we would also love to see you coming to the CAGE conference virtually in February.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm going to leave here and get back to work. Thank you for inviting me, and it was good to virtually see everybody.
Thanks so much, Tottie.
Thank you, Toddy.
Thank you.
Bye.
We appreciate it. So I think now Julia's going to take us away to, and I'm going to put folks in breakout rooms, and we're going to debrief a little bit about what we've just heard and have some time to massage that with a small group. So Julia, you want to get us started?
I would, in small groups, talk about what are your key questions that you have at this particular time, and then prioritize them into your top, second, and third. And when we come back, we will deal first with the number 1 questions, and then as time permits on to 2 and 3. So someone in the group facilitate the conversation, and someone write down your questions and how you prioritize them, and enjoy visiting with each other.
Okay, so I'm going to put you into breakout rooms. Hello.
Hi, I'm in.
Okay. So now let's think about this. So you were asked to think about some questions
Zoom meeting.
and have a reporter in your group.
Can I call you back?
So
But it'll be about an hour. What's your number?
I think that we have, so would ask that you unmute yourself when you're about to speak and keep yourself muted when you're not, because we have some background noise. Thank you. Okay. So here we go. Let's hear from groups. What were some questions that you really would like to talk about?
I was in group 5, and we had questions basically about servicing kids while with NTI, and they wanted to ask, what services do districts provide for their visual and performing arts kids when you're looking at virtual instruction? That was one question. Do we want to list the questions, or do we want to do a question and then talk, or how do you want to do it?
Let's talk for a little bit on each question.
Does anybody have any ideas on how right now how you're servicing visual and performing arts students online?
So I don't know if this helps or not. And I'm new at this, so I may be doing it wrong. I'm going to say that first. But I'm in Russellville, and our students who are identified visual performing arts have an art class or a media class that they're going to be in. Of course, we're in school, but we had the option to be virtual. So if a child doesn't want to come to school, they can be at home. And so what we've done is set up a Skype so that during the time that the teacher's having class, during the art class or whatever that they're going to be in, then that child Skypes in and completes the project from home, and they can pick up materials from the school, just a drop-off program, so that they can participate in whatever art projects or things that they need. I don't know if that helps.
No, I think that's a great idea. If you can Skype into a face-to-face class, that works. Any other ideas for visual and performing arts?
Hi, I don't care to share. My name is Hannah England. I'm the gifted coordinator at Russell County School District. And we offered an experience with our students last week that Miss Kathy Anderson had sent out. And it was from the Louisville Ballet, and it was the Witches Carnival. And so it was offered for a week, in that you got these educational resources that came with it. But we just kind of zoomed in, invited our kids to attend, and then showed them the ballet on our computer. And so we're going to try to call it more of virtual field trips, to where we can kind of excite them about going somewhere, but offering those services even though it's in a virtual platform.
That's a great idea, Hannah.
Can I be a bummer and ask if that costs money?
Yes, you sure can. It cost $200 for up to 30 kids. And at first we agreed, we thought that was kind of pricey, but then you see the educational resources that come with it. And it's like a project-based learning activity. There's other ballet videos that would come with it. And so after looking at that and noticing that we could really take this and build on it throughout the year, even, that it became kind of
An investment.
Yes. And we are blessed to have the Wicker Quinn Family Foundation, a private family who has donated funds to our gifted program. And so we were able to use that to show another way of servicing. But I completely understand that at this time, you've got to kind of try to find some available resources that's not too pricey, but it was an investment. So I think it was worth it.
Thank you, Hannah.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Are you all familiar with the C-SPAN classroom activities? If not, you can go to their website, but I'll kind of share with you what we've done for GT and in our middle and high school. C-SPAN already has lessons designed for the students, and everything that they need is there. For example, right now I'm looking at art, gifted and talented, middle and high. So the teacher went through and she invited every student in that particular area. And we also included leadership and creativity for the art as well. The students, and we had some conversations with students and teachers that these are optional, but we are on the other side, of course, looking at their work. And this particular lesson is called Explore Art by Time Period. We had 8 students at the middle school level assigned, and 4 have already turned in the work. So it's one of those things, if you're interested, if you want to do it, we're here to assist, to provide feedback. In working with the teachers, most of the teachers agreed that they would, provide some extra points or some kind of work, but it's a very user-friendly resource, and it certainly works well right now with virtual school.
That's a great idea. And that actually taps into another question we had was, how are you servicing middle and high school folks while
Yes.
We have virtual learning?
And that was our original intent, specifically to target the middle and high school group, because with everything being virtual, we knew that would be more difficult. The same options are available to our high school students. Now, I will say we haven't had as much participation by the high school students, but I also know we had been doing a schedule where on Mondays, our students like A from their last name A to letter M would come to school, and on Tuesdays, the rest of the alphabet. So one day in, one day virtual. And in talking with those students, curriculum is moving very quickly. Teachers know they have a lot that they need students to master. So most of the true gifted high-end students are really working hard anyway. They may be looking at some of these resources, but as of yet, they're not necessarily just working on that. They're just, they have a lot going on with school itself. But it's out there and available to them, and then we can see if they can pose questions, they can share out information. It's a wonderful resource. Actually, Scott Harper had found that. I don't know where, if he'd been at a training or where he actually got it, but he shared it with Carrie Mosier and I, and we thought it was just a great tool. They also have in every area of GT lessons available for elementary. And that's our next step, is to work down to the elementary level. Well, I think I can invite you all to see what we've done. I will work on that while you all continue to discuss.
That's great, thanks. Are there any other ideas to service middle and high school folks who are learning virtually?
Tracy, I had something to share within the question before that about arts. If you have twice exceptional students that you're serving in the arts area, I encourage you to check out the Arts for All program of Kentucky, because they are, like Western Kentucky University has one of their grants right now, and we picked up kits, and it has the vocabulary that kids need to study and all of the materials, and it's all free for the families and students. And then they have Zoom lessons also for the children each week. So we've also done a mural painting project over the summer. So if you have twice exceptional students, definitely check out Arts for All.
Thanks so much.
So another group, what is your primary question?
I'll go for our group. We were in group 1, and actually Dan Costello and I were both in that group. So we only actually had 2 district coordinators in that group. So they came up with one question. They were just curious about feedback from teachers about scheduling regular PLCs around GT. And if people do that, what kind of, and Donna, you may jump in there and reframe if I'm not answering or asking your question correctly, but that was, that's what she was wanting to know, what kind of feedback from teachers people were getting for scheduling when they were scheduling meetings.
I don't necessarily have an answer to that specific question, but I know Allen County is scheduling a book study that's it's focused on gifted education, and it includes administrators as well as teachers.
It makes me think about what Dr. Adams talked to us about the relationship. And we know that book studies are often a way in, Learning Forward always says that when you're developing a new community, that a book study is a nice way to enter that community, because you establish common language and common understandings and then move from there. So that might be a way to begin that PLC conversation, like Dr. Adams was talking about, begin with a book study.
Let's go to another group and what's your number 1 question?
I'll share for our group. I have no idea what number we were. Maybe someone remembers. So we really were thinking more about the logistics, the system pieces we would need to have questions answered for. And so one of the questions was, was it determined which tier a gifted student needed? We would need more clarification on that process. We weren't clear on that.
And I think maybe that's a Toddy question.
I would agree. And then a lot of the rest of our questions were really around making sure that we had schedules that supported this type of service, where sometimes a student who might need tier 3 reading might need a tiered gifted service too. So there's some competing resources. So how could we, it's really more the system piece, how could we schedule that? And then thinking about how to, for the twice exceptional students, maybe a student with special needs who needs more social instruction in order to be able to participate in the gifted. Like, how could we have an intervention that made them have better access to the gifted programming with their peers? And I'm looking here to make sure, thinking about how to help teachers have the dual conversations around tiers and talk about not only students who need academic interventions, but what does gifted look like in those same conversations?
And anyone certainly can respond. I don't think this will be a full answer to your question on 2E, but let me just say a few words about it. The key thing is to have the gifted resource teacher, the classroom teacher, and the special educator working together. And the research tells us that, frankly, lots of special educators and lots of regular educators and lots of gifted educators don't know much about 2E. So it's an opportunity to learn together. There is no doubt that the focus needs to be on the strength while supporting whatever needs to be supported in order for the child to thrive in school. There's so much to learn about 2E. Who would like to add on to that?
I would like to tag on to that. That focusing on the strength, I think you're so right, and that's true for especially when we talk about 2E, but for all students. And building on what Elizabeth was asking, connected to that, the social, sometimes social emotional or just social skills or whatever needs to be there. That again, focusing on that strength and bringing those strengths in. I do think the human pieces of us then see that person in a new light, perhaps. And so I do enjoy that conversation. So that's a question. We'll take part of that back to Toddy, and then we can send that out to the group when we get her response too.
To piggyback on Jamie, I wish that the IEP process was more strengths focused. It's this much of it, and then it's all about what the kids can't do. And I just hate that, because these are kids who have so many wonderful attributes that process is just completely set up the wrong way. If I could change one thing in the world, that'd be the thing I would change.
And of course, the GSSP in the law is an individual education plan that is simply given a different name due to the fact that the number of students for which a gifted resource teacher has the responsibility for is so different from the caseload that a special education teacher would have. And just think of the numbers that Toddy shared and how challenging that would be. But the GSSP has the strength of law. Another group and the key question?
We can go. I don't know what group number we were either, but we kind of talked about math specifically. Of course, I'm kind of interested in gifted and mathematics both, and threw that out as a query to the group. And we were wondering how she approaches getting her teachers ready for having the tools for interventions that are kind of drilling down to that the skills that they need for the GT interventions in mathematics, especially when I believe she mentioned that they weren't GT certified, and so that her students can advance and be successful with the GT RTI. So what does she need to do to help support her teachers with the tools they need for GT RTI and math?
So Janet, could we generalize that question and ask folks in general, what do they do to help teachers be able to have the toolkit to do that?
Sure, yeah.
And perhaps maybe not what you do, but what does your district provide? Does silence mean you don't know, or that they don't provide? We're not very talkative on that one, Janet.
I think it's an area of need.
Sounds that way.
Mm-hmm.
What's another top priority question? What's another question that's any place on your list that you'd like to ask?
I'll ask another question that was on our list. Toddy mentioned that she does not provide direct services, that her role is a little different from that. And I think that's not necessarily the case with most gifted coordinators. They're actually providing the services. So our group talked about how do you utilize other teachers with providing services, aside from classroom teachers doing differentiation. I promise you, if this were in person, we would never be this quiet, would we?
Well, it was our group's question, so I'm not adding any answer to the pot here, but I want to say it's just so challenging right now, especially. I just cannot emphasize that enough. Teachers are stressed to the max. And the classroom teacher is who is holding this whole education boat afloat right now. And so for me to try not to spread myself too thin, to see each and every one of my kids, but to ask them to implement something that, even though it may be designed to be, part of what they're already doing, without that relationship, like Toddy talked about, they're going to see it as one more thing they need to do. And so, especially my first year in this position, it's a really fine line for me right now. So no answers, just more question, I guess.
And it's understandable, your response. Yes.
I don't know if this answers your question or not, Allison and Ms. Inman, but so I'm new too, and I'm just figuring this out. But what we decided to do was have a PLC with all the teachers in that grade level, and then just to talk to them about what it should look like not tell them what to do, but just say this is what it should look like. Because I think a lot of times people don't understand. And so even if, I don't know, they don't know. They don't know when they don't know what they don't know, right? And so just bringing that information to the table of what should a child who's gifted in this area be receiving, and then let them have that conversation of how they want to make that happen for our virtual learners. And that's been kind of helpful. And then they have some buy-in to the GSSP because, then they've had they've had a hand in it. They've had a say in what they're going to do for our virtual learners and what they're going to do. And then it's not just an extra thing. It's something they came up with. I don't know if that helps or not.
Of course it does. Yes.
And Sarah, she calls me Miss Inman because she was my student at one point in time, but please call me Tracy, okay?
I will. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Sarah. And I think you're right. The more buy-in we have, the more ownership, of course, the more involvement you have. And I'm just thinking out loud here. So many of the kids who might be spinning around in their chairs, or, the ones who are driving teachers crazy online, could very well be their gifted kids. So it might even be from the approach, are you having trouble with some of your kids paying attention? It could be that, this is the issue, and then providing options for them, things that they could do. And it could even be something as simple as, going to the C-SPAN classroom options and letting them explore some of those. But these are tough questions.
They are tough questions. And building on what you said, Sarah, and you, Tracy, I'm thinking about, Toddy had the behaviors listed, and she said that the behaviors, really, those gifted behaviors, are something that really, I heard, and clearly, I think I heard from her heart that that's really what you look for. And I wonder how many of our teachers, whether on virtual or face-to-face, really understand those behaviors. And it's almost like an if-then. I know one of the classes that I took years and years ago that helped me so much was to even think about not just the behavior I was seeing from a student, but also how that behavior made me feel as the educator, as the teacher. And because when I had certain emotional reactions to that, then what that meant. And so I wonder about that for our teachers, if we could help them see those behaviors, like you were saying, like if you see even just someone as simple as spinning around, or someone looking off, they're thinking of something else, what could that mean? It made me wonder about even some training we might do for that, or just some simple if-thens. If you see this, you might try this, or if, I don't know, but immediately that came to mind, because I think back to stories and that we've all experienced even before COVID. I think COVID just enhances everything we already knew. It was always there. Like good instruction's always been there. It's just enhanced the need for it. So that might be something we could think about. Are those tools we could create as a community?
Can I add on to that?
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Really, as we're thinking about distance learning, and I think this is bigger than coronavirus, I think that we will see a reshaping of education. I think that it will maybe be spurred by corona, but we already had a lot of these tools in place. Is parents as our partners for this? I know that's challenging. One thing that I think that we might add to that behaviors list is when we think about our populations, whether it's SPED, TUI, or gifted, I think if you're receiving a lot of emotional responses from parents, it's worth delving into, like if they're coming frequently, because parents aren't going to know to say, oh, my child might have a learning disability, or, oh, I think my child is finishing everything early. They might, you're not giving enough work, or maybe we're seeing behavior problems because the child's not being challenged appropriately. They're not going to know to say those things, just like we talked about. Teachers don't always know those behavioral things. But I think that as teachers, we can watch for it, because we're not seeing those children. We're seeing them an hour on a Zoom meeting, which is not the same as seeing them all day long and seeing how they ask questions and respond to the stimulus that we give them. So, but I do think if you are consistently receiving caregiver emails that have an emotional response, for many reasons, it's worth looking into, but we have to consider, just because the child's under his table or spinning in his chair, or maybe bullying, sometimes we see bullying in children that are gifted in leadership. they don't always look like what parents want to see or what they would expect to see. So how do you take those responses and then filter them down in our new world? Does that make sense?
And combining what you said and what Jamie said and what Toddy said, you know, you come not with questions necessarily, but with answers. And so almost an if-then for parents and an if-then for teachers, maybe that could help. Suggestion.
I think we have some gifted kids who don't want to be seen on a virtual screen. And that could be interpreted a whole lot of different ways, but I think it's tied to anxiety for some. What you and I know that we're not looking at everyone's face, but if I'm on a screen and I'm a kid, I don't know that. And so I think there's some understanding that needs to filter into that type of behavior as well.
We are having an issue in this virtual setting has brought this about with some of our students about intrinsic motivation. And of course, we know that not all gifted students have that, not all adults have that, and we all struggle with it in some point. But do you all have any suggestions or comments on how to teach intrinsic motivation or how to bring that out? Because we have students that are struggling, our middle school gifted students that are struggling with the number of Fs they have. And with us even bringing them in, working with them, trying to get them caught up, and there is nothing there that they want to do it. And I mean, I know that's part with the maybe the underachieving, but the virtual setting has really played havoc on the motivation of our students.
And I'm hearing that from others as well.
Okay.
But I also think we need to not ignore the fact that there's a pandemic going on, and some of our gifted kids, as we know, are going to be extra sensitive to the social issues that are happening with Black Lives Matter and with the pandemic. And so I don't think there's one easy answer for that. I think there are a lot of factors going into that.
I would also say engagement.
To that. Go ahead, Allison.
I would also say look at engagement and the types of tasks that they're being asked to do. I think we know face-to-face when we're working with gifted students that it needs to match their level of challenge, but also be engaging. Like Tracy said, they're interested a lot of times and they're sensitive in these topics. I just think that we need to, sometimes the things that I'm seeing going out, and this is just personal experience, are not always the most engaging things. So if you're already fighting anxiety and you're already fighting, I'm afraid to be on the camera, and you're already fighting, I'm worried about, you know, my sibling or my grandparents, that's just going to fall really low on, think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, whereas before they may have been more tolerant to try to comply in a classroom. If it's not engaging, I know everything can't be super engaging, but I think that's another piece of that factor there.
And just to follow up, and I agree with what Allison just brought up, you know, 3 things that drive intrinsic motivation are perceived competence, perceived autonomy, and perceived relatedness. And I think virtual learning has really put a hit on the perceived relatedness with students. So anything you can do, whether it's breakout rooms or assigning projects together or anything you can do to make them feel more connected to one another, I think will go a long way towards other gifted kids. And autonomy, helping them to feel more in control of their learning and to have choices should help, you know, theoretically at least. But again, you know, I totally agree with what Tracy said, you know, recognizing that we need to change our expectations given the current environment.
And that goes for teachers too, right?
These are really important questions. Does anyone else have a question they'd like to throw out to the group? Well, if not, may I share just a little bit of information? You might call me the announcement person at the end of this. All of you know that WKU offers a master's in gifted education and talent development, as well as a specialist degree and the endorsement. If anyone is wanting to complete the endorsement this year, GTE 536 will be offered over the winter term, which is 5 weeks this year instead of 3 weeks, December and January. And I heard Toddy say that no one else had a gifted endorsement. Well, if you have people who were wanting to pursue the endorsement yet this year, and they could finish it with the summer, the winter term will provide the opportunity to do that. And then in the spring, we'll offer GTE 537, 540, and Psych 432G, and GTE 636. So there's several classes that will be offered during the spring semester. Also, we are looking for people who are interested in an EDD in education with a focus on diverse learners, and gifted will be a part of that. And I would suggest that if you are interested, it's really easy to go to the WKU website and look for the EDD. It's for a closed cohort.
Julia, can I just jump in too? I think everyone probably has heard, but in case they haven't, WKU also is offering a teacher discount on tuition. So they've brought it down significantly for courses in the master's or the endorsement. So if you haven't been aware of that, please check out our website, because it's there to help teachers, especially now.
And I think, Tony, it matches anyone's tuition rate at this particular time. The Kentucky Association of School Superintendents is going to have a face-to-face meeting in December in Louisville. And yesterday when Jim Flynn called, he said that on their listing of priorities for the General Assembly session, which is a budget session in the second year, that gifted is on that list of priorities. And I would want you to be reaching out to each member of the Kentucky House and Senate to talk to them about how important gifted is to you. And I would encourage you to get parents to do the same thing. We haven't had a budget year in the second year since we switched to, so it is incredibly important to do that now, not to do that in January. Do it then too, but right now is the time to do it. And if you get any response, positive or negative, why don't you send me an email? It's really nice to keep up with what's going on, who's talked to whom. The Center for Gifted Studies has sent out an email asking you to update your coordinator information. If you have not done that, would you please do that? It is so helpful to make sure that we're up to date with what's out there. Then I'm going to share some information about an opportunity that we're going to be offering through the center. I think most of you know we have had a cohort of superintendents, several cohorts over the years, and we call that the Victoria Fellows. And the superintendents come together 3 times a year, and we learn together, and we learn about things that superintendents could do from their leadership position to support advanced students and to enhance equity and excellence. And we have received a gift and a small grant that will allow us to do something similar with principals. And we're going to be looking for a cohort of middle school principals and another cohort of elementary principals with the focus on equity and excellence. So if you have someone that you think would be really good for that, we will have the applications out in December, and we'll be looking for principals who want to be engaged in that conversation. One more thing. Oh, I do have one more thing. Through a different organization, we are going to be looking at what the Office of Civil Rights gathers from districts and compiles as data that is available to anyone. If you have strong feelings about the questions that you are being asked or that your district is being asked, and if you don't know, perhaps you should ask in your district as to what the information that's being gathered is, I would be delighted if you would communicate with me about questions that you think might be a little more indicative of what your district really is doing for gifted kids than what is currently being asked. So OCR, get in touch with me. Get in touch with me after you've talked to your Kentucky representatives and senators. This is a time to make things happen. And I would tell you that with all that's going on, it would also be a time gifted could be forgotten. And we can't let that happen. All of you know that gifted funding is at the level that it was in 1990. And I am not speaking incorrectly. And all of you know that there is nothing in 2020 or 2021 that is really at the amount that it cost in 1990. That's 30 years ago. So speak out and make sure that others in your district know to speak out to your representatives. You've elected them. This is current. And so make sure that they hear from you.
Julia?
Do you have questions about any of that?
I was just going to remind you about the survey.
Oh, the survey that, is it up and ready to be?
Yeah, I have it in the chat. The URL is in the chat.
There is a survey that it has come out from KDE that it would be incredibly important for each of you to complete and make sure that you are answering those questions, including gifted at some time, so that it gets a mention. We have a new commissioner of education, and we're all excited to meet him. He is very interested in gifted being equitable. So please know that that's a real priority today. Of course, it would be anyway, but it's high on his list.
We're not often asked our opinion about gifted from that type of organization. So, and it doesn't take that long to fill out, but it's really important, folks.
So maybe you could click on it and fill it out as you are, and let that be the conclusion of our meeting, that you will work on that and then check out.
Yes, it could be an exit slip, couldn't it?
It sure could.
Hey, Jamie.
Yes.
Could I jump in and just say, piggyback on something that Julia said at the beginning of her remarks? She was talking about the gifted endorsement through WKU, and I just wanted to let you all know, some of you I know have been on some of our informational sessions about GREC Ed, which is a continuing education option where people can get a rank change. And the gifted endorsement is a really great example of when someone may want to, or say, have some level of interest in getting that endorsement, but because it doesn't lead to a master's and then that master's rank change, they maybe are less interested in pursuing that endorsement. But if a person was in our Grec Ed continuing education option, they could take those courses through WKU and get that gifted endorsement, complete the other components of Grec Ed, and then have a rank change at the end of that, which might make that something that makes it more interesting for some people to pursue. So I just wanted to make sure that you all were aware of that. And if you're not aware and you want more information about it, you can let me know, and I can let you talk to Dan Costello. He's over our Grec Ed. He was on earlier, but I think he had to hop off. So we can certainly get you all more information about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. It's a wonderful opportunity for us to collaborate and think about how the folks in the cohorts could work together in the cohort. And if they should need the rank change, they could have it. So thank you. Now, we've already talked a little bit about CAGE and about we have a February date coming up for CAGE and the virtual time frame. So we're going to attach those dates when we send this out. And then also our next meeting will be just the week right before that, or about 10 days, I think, before that. So we will see you again in network meeting in early February. We'll send those dates out. And then May 6th, I believe, is our third time that we were set to meet as a network. We just want to remind you of that. And again, we've already blasted you with those dates, but we like to be sure you have those in your calendar if possible. We know that next spring things, there might be a vaccine and things might just open up more, and so we want to be sure to get those dates on your calendar. Thank you so much. We're going to be sending out this recording. So if you're seeing us on recording, we missed you, but we're glad you're here. So thank you. Is there anything else for the good of the order?
Just thanks to each of you who has joined us for the meeting.
Absolutely. Thank you. Take care. Be safe. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye, everybody.
Complete the
Thank
survey.
you.
Oh, yes, please.
Do the survey.
Yes, go into the chat box and click